Hey, I'm Neil Parfit. Welcome to video number 0.4, number 3 of working with the ER-301 sound computer. This video, these first three anyway, are focused on the 0.4 OS and also sort of skewed towards more new users who are just working with this module for the first time and hopefully clarifying some inner working mysteries of what's happening in the 301 and what do some of these things mean and what do they do. What I'm going over today is custom units, and you'll see it in the list, insert, and if you'll see this header here, containers, custom, 2 bands, 3 bands, 4 bands, 6 bands, what is that stuff? And that's what we're going to look at today. So, like most videos recently, I feel that hi Goog! I feel the best process to demonstrate a lot of these features is making a really basic subtractive synth. So let's do that now. What do we need for that? We need an oscillator. So I'm going to insert a saw. So we have our saw, and then to make this synth subtractive, we need to add a filter. So let's just add a ladder low pass filter. And remember, the signal flows from left to right. So if I added another signal generator before this saw, we wouldn't hear it because this is a generator, so it won't pass audio through it. Whereas the filter is a processor, so it's expecting input signal, it does something to it, and spits it out the other side. The same applies to a VCA. So I'm going to add a bipolar VCA, and the sound is stopped because the VCA is closed. So I can manually adjust the bias if I want to open it up. But like a traditional synth, I want a gate signal triggering an ADSR to control this VCA. So let's do that. We're going to add an ADSR into its subchain. So I'm in the VCA subchain. I'm going to insert. I'm going to scroll down, and let's find that ADSR envelope. Oop, I think I just passed it. I should be able to do this blindfolded. All right, envelopes, ADSR. And we have all the most basic building blocks we need for the synth to work. So if I hit up, it'll take us back to our parent level. And here's all the stuff. So what do we need to do now to make this work? If I press my KB37, nothing is going to happen because we haven't taken our physical assignments and connected them to these different unit controls. So the first thing I want to control is, does this VCA work? Let's go in there and check. There is nothing controlling this ADSR right now, so let's assign a gate. So if I try, this is a specific kind of control where if I go and assign something here, it's just going to say input only. And all that means is this ADSR unit is expecting signal coming in to the left of it to trigger it. So that's easy. All we need to do is go to the input control of our chain. I'm going to make sure Jax is selected, which it is. Here's all our physical ports. So if I play my keyboard, I can see that my gate's coming in. If I hit the M button below this scope, it expands it, and now I can actually see, oh yeah, I have a gate on A1. And there it is, and now you can see that it's firing this input right here. Just as a side note, if I insert something else here that generates a signal, like a saw wave or something like that, and I slow this down to LFO speeds, notice that can trigger an ADSR as well. Just as a free running kind of thing, just to give you ideas for later. But I only want this A1 signal here to work, so I'm just going to select this, hit delete, and there we go. There's our ADSR being triggered. I'm just going to adjust these slightly, and notice that nothing is happening. We can see our envelope firing. The last step of this sort of subchain puzzle is you always have to make sure you have the gain at something other than 0, because if it's at 0, this signal that's coming in isn't being amplified and hitting our parameter right here. So notice as I turn it up, now we can hear it working. This is probably the most exciting sound I've ever made. There you go, look at that. Beautiful. What's the second thing we need to do to make this synth work? We need our oscillator's frequency controlled by an outside source. In this case, I want my keys to control the pitch. So I'm going to go to our volt per octave control. I'm going to go to the subchain. I'm going to go to our input assignment. And I'm going to open our scope. And it looks like A2 is our pitch coming from the KB37. Yep. So there it is. And for good measure, I'm going to just assign that to the filter as well, so we have a consistent tracking. I'm going to go to our volt per octave of our filter. Same thing. I'm just going to make sure we're on jacks. Yes. A2 is our pitch. And there we go. Our most basic mono synth. Cool. Okay. And you know what? I'm just going to add a few more little things. Let's just add a slight amount of portamento. So that affects our pitch. So we want to go into our pitch control of our oscillator. And we want our A2 pitch signal to be processed by a slew. So let's find it. Slew limiter. And you can sort of adjust this to taste. I can go into fine control here. There we go. We got a little bit being processed here. And you can sort of see in the scope that it sort of doesn't jump up instantly. It sort of like gradually climbs up to it. So far, hi Googie. Oh, okay. So far, we have our simple synth made, consisting of 3 units. So where does custom units come into play here? Well, let me just show you what they do first of all. Right now, we have this all-in-one chain, and let's do this. I'm going to hold down Shift at the left side while our cursor is on the left side of our first unit. I'm going to skim over all this, and I'm going to release my Shift. And notice how it says 3 marked units. And I have options to copy, cut, or move to mixer. I'm just going to cut this for now, and it works just like a word processor. So I've cut it. Basically, it's pulling it out of our chain, and it's sort of in a virtual clipboard. And I'm going to insert a custom unit. And let's figure out what a custom unit is. So I'm going to add it in there. Ooh, nerdy user. Nice, nice. What is this? It looks like no other unit. It has an open parameter here. So if we open it, now we're in a subchain of this custom unit. And just to demonstrate how this works, I'm just going to hit paste. So we have our synth we built within this custom unit. And if I hit up, now everything we just did is sort of contained within this. And that's why it's called a container, or it's under the container category. And you notice how where it says open, that's actually a scope showing us the output of this unit. So basically, it's an easy way to sort of contain a whole bunch of processes. And whatever you have within and whatever is in its subchains, all of it gets remembered. So it's all just sort of housed in there. Let's take this a step further. Oh, and actually one important thing to note is, oh, actually, you know what? I'll get to that in a minute. So we have our custom unit with a synth within. Let's do something a little bit more in depth here. I'm going to open this back up. I'm going to take our oscillator. I'm going to hold down Shift. I'm going to let go right after it. And I'm going to move this to a mixer. So it's basically taken our oscillator with a slew limiter and all our assignments within and put it on a mixer channel. And then after that mixer channel, we have our ladder and we have our VCA. So I'm just going to rename this mixer. I'm just going to call it, I'm going to go Shift 0 to clear this. I'm just going to call this OSC. And that way we know this mixer channel is an oscillator. And I just wanted to show you this just to demonstrate something. So we have our signal within a mixer. And what that means is if anything is inserted to the left of it, it will mix whatever this signal is plus the signal coming to the left to the output of this custom unit. So if I inserted another oscillator here, notice how it's mixing both of them together? So we have that kind of thing happening. One really critical thing to know is that also applies to audio coming into the left of a custom unit. So if I have an audio source to the left, this audio signal of this saw wave is being passed into that custom unit, passing through along with this mixer signal here into whatever's happening here. So in our case, we have a filter and a VCA. So a really important concept to know. If you don't want signal being processed from the outside, if you don't want signal coming in to the custom unit and being processed, you have to put something to the immediate left that would block it. And most processors that do that are oscillators, sample players, anything that's like a playback-based system, so granular processes and stuff like that. A pass-through processor would be something like a filter, a reverb, delay, VCA, that kind of thing. It's expecting signal to the left of it. So I'm just going to back out of this. I'm going to erase that. So far, it's just acting as a container. We're not really seeing what the true power and where custom units get very useful. So let me show you the next thing. So I'm going to go to the header of this custom unit. I'm going to go into the menu. I'm going to go edit controls. If I was using a synth, what are the two most basic controls I'd need? In this synth, I'd need a gate control to trigger our ADSR, and I need a pitch control to control the pitch of our oscillator. And that's my cat again. She's so noisy. So I'm going to insert a pitch control, and I can name it if I want. Right now it's called Tune 1. I'll just leave it as is. I'm going to hit enter. And what else do we need? We need a gate control. It's called gate 1. We'll just leave it at that as well. The only thing we need to change here, and you have to put this window in focus, so press any of these M keys. Notice that the whole thing's highlighted. Now I can use the encoder to skim down. I want the output mode of this control to act as a gate, not a trigger. So that way, if I hold a key down, I can use the sustain stage of my ADSR. So I'm going to turn this to gate, and I'm going to press enter. And now look at that. We have a tune and a gate control. So if I hit enter, check it out. Our nerdy user custom unit still has a scope, but to the right of it, we have a tune control and a gate control. So now that we have these two controls on the outermost layer of our custom unit, we can assign these like any other control anywhere else. So for this tune, I'm going to assign that to A2, which is my pitch control, and I'm going to assign the gate to, I think it's A1, which is my KB37 gate. And notice now if I look at these controls, you can see them reacting. You can see my external pitch, and my gate is definitely working. But so far, these aren't connected to anything within. They're just sort of just sitting there taking signal. So the next step of using a custom control, or just a control, I'm going to open, I'm going to go into our oscillator submixer, and I'm going to reassign this volt per octave here. Right now, it's hard assigned to A2, which is right here. I'm going to reassign this. I'm going to go, instead of jacks, I'm going to go locals. And now, I'm going to skim around, and let me find it. There it is. See, these are the two top level controls that it has made, Tune 1 and Gate 1. And you can see that they're assigned accordingly to my outside jacks. So I'm going to assign Tune 1 to that oscillator's pitch control. And I'm going to back up a level. I am going to back up one more level. I'm going to go to this filter. I'm going to also assign that because that's still hard assigned to A2. And I'm going to hit locals, and I'm also going to set that to Tune 1. So that's done. And I'm going to go into our VCA subchain, And instead of that being hard assigned to A1, I'm going to reassign that, go to locals, and I want to assign that to my gate 1. So if everything works, it shouldn't operate or behave any different. And there you go. So everything's on the outermost level. If I want to reassign these to different ports, they're right here. So you're probably thinking, okay, well, we've reassigned these to the top level controls, but isn't that just sort of a pain in the ass? I mean, I can just go in there and hard assign them and I'm done. Where this gets really powerful and really handy is, what if I have a whole bunch of units referencing these? You wouldn't want to have to reassign those later. Like, let's say there was like 40 things tapping off this. You wouldn't have to go to each of those 40 things to reassign your tuning and your gate. All you'd have to do is assign these two the physical jack inputs, and internally it would just remap those and figure it all out, because all the internal parameters are looking at what these are assigned to. And this is the quickest example I can give you. So right now we have a mixer called os with our oscillator in there. Let's shift select this. I'm going to go copy. I'm going to paste twice. So now we have 3 oscillators, and I'm just going to go into each of these headers. I'll just add a number here so we know that they're separate. So os2, and then we'll go os3. So we have our 3 oscillators. I'm going to go into the second one. I'm just going to go into fine adjust. I'm going to detune this slightly. Get a little bit of movement. And on our third oscillator, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to just adjust this volt per octave down an octave. So notice that everything is tracking properly. So let's say, 2 days later, I open up this preset and I've unwired everything, and now everything is assigned to B1 and B2. All I have to do is just readjust these 2 controls. So my tuning is now, what does it look like? It's B2. So we got our beat seat. Notice that we got it again. You can see it adjusting. And our gate is B number 1. So it's taking those 2 signals and it's automatically distributing them to within everything in here that needs it. Because instead of it being hard assigned to a jack, it's a hard assigned to that local, which is that parameter called tune 1. So if you have a huge oscillator running or a huge synth running, and you're sharing the patch, or maybe you're making a copy of it, you only have to update these 2 things and that's it. You don't have to waste a whole bunch of time, which comes in really handy. So let me give you another example of where these can be really useful. I'm going to go into this header again. I'm going to go edit controls. I'm going to add another gate. And I'm just going to call this sync. So I'm going to call this S, Y, N, C. And instead of the output mode being a gate, I'm going to turn it into a toggle. So I'm going to hit enter, enter again. And now notice we have this control here called sync. And I can assign that to something externally, or I can just highlight it, hit focus, and now notice that holds on, and if I press it again, it holds off. So it's basically like an on and off kind of switch that we can use to control something. So let's use that to actually control syncing our oscillator 2. So I'm going to open our custom unit. I'm going to go to oscillator 2. I'm going to go within it. And in order to sync an oscillator, we need to be able to send oscillator 1 or oscillator 3 to the sync input of this oscillator. So how do we do that? We'll highlight that. We'll go to our subchain, input assign. We're going to go to locals. And now we can highlight what signal we want to grab. So in my case, I want to grab oscillator 1 signal. So I'm going to highlight over that oscillator. You can see the scope there. I'm going to hit enter. And it's assigned. Our sync is firing. We can verify this if we adjust our pitch of oscillator 2. So let's try that. Awesome. So that's working. How do we control the on-off state of this signal? All we have to do is go into the subchain, and we just need to be able to block this signal. So what can we use to block a signal? We can use a VCA. So I'm going to add a VCA here. Our signal is now blocked. And what can we use to control the on-off state of that VCA? Why not use that toggle gate? It's either on or it's off. So I'm going to go to the subchain of this VCA. I'm going to go to the input assign of that VCA. We're not using this with like an ADSR or anything like that. We're using this with like a controlled gate signal. So we're going to go into our input assign. We're going to go to locals, and let's assign that to our sync control that we made. So enter. It's assigned. And let's see what happens. So far, we got no sync. We can back out a level. Let's see what happens when we turn this on. Still nothing. And this is where a lot of people get confused. They're like, well, why isn't this working? The last step you have to do is, just like any subchain, let's take a look at our VCA. You have to make sure your gain on that subchain is still turned up. So I just heard the sync kick in. You can see the scope. That signal is indeed being passed through. And I'll just set this somewhere really high. So check this out. So now we're using that control as sort of an on-off state for a function within. And you can use that for anything. It could be controlling like an envelope. It could be controlling the audio signal from an oscillator or a looper or a granular processor. It's really up to you. So you know what? Just because we're using this as a sync control, why not add another pitch parameter here for our oscillator too? So I'll just go into our custom units header, edit controls. I'll put it next to our sync, so I'll insert pitch control. I'll call this, how about we just call this O2 and then tune. Let's see if we can fit that in there. O2 tune. In this case, because we're dealing with sync, I don't want to go below the frequency of oscillator 1. So I'm going to set the lowest range to 0 because I don't want to go into the minuses. So I can set that to 0, and we'll leave the tuning max where it's at. That's fine. Or you know what? Let's just add a bit more. Something ridiculous. So now we have our O2 tune right here. And just like before, we can go into our oscillators. I'm going to go to oscillator 2, and let's set this back to 0. And instead of using this tune parameter here, I'm going to use the other one now, our O2 tune. And this should work right away. Let's just see. But notice how we have a problem. As soon as I turn off sync, now oscillator 2 isn't tracking because it's looking at this signal. And this is the other sort of mystery that hopefully gets unraveled here, is the input of this can also be assigned. So I'm going to reassign our original pitch. And just to show you you can do this, I can assign the output of this control to another control's input. And I just wanted you to see that rabbit hole in action. So at 0, it's basically passing through whatever this tuning signal is. And if I adjust this, it's basically acting as an additional offset. You can see it right there. And if I turn on sync, then it's acting as a synchronized oscillator. And just to make this rabbit hole even deeper, I'm going to add one more thing in here. Maybe if I insert a mixer, what if that oscillator 2 signal also had a little bit of vibrato movement? So I'm going to insert a sine wave here. And I'm going to turn down my mixer so it's not as drastic. So this is demonstrating that not only can we assign another control to another control, we can also introduce additional processing within this control and have it all work together. And just to finish this off, maybe we don't always want that LFO running. So I'm going to add another control. I'll just insert a gate control. Same thing, I'm going to change this to a toggle. So it's either on or it's off. It's not only held high when there's a gate signal that's being a high voltage. I'm going to call this LFO. So we'll go L, F, O. And there it is. And just like before, I'm going to use this as an on-off state for something. So I'm going to go into my tune. I'm going to go into this submixer, this mixer channel that has that sine wave acting as an LFO. I'm going to set this level to 0. And within that subchain, I'm going to assign that local to control either that 0 or high state. So I'm going to set that to LFO. So if we back out right to the top of this, there we go. This gate control is now controlling the VCA level 2 levels deep on this control here. Let's add another kind of control here that we haven't used yet. I'm going to go to the header of this custom unit. I'm going to go to Edit Controls. I'm going to just scroll to the end. I could actually place this anywhere I want. I'm just deciding to place it at the end here. You can also move controls. Like let's say I want that LFO control right at the beginning of my custom unit. I can hit hold to move. This highlights, and I can just turn the encoder and drop it somewhere else. So if I let go and then hit enter to get out of here, notice that that control is now over here. So lots of customization, and you can really tweak it to, you know, your working scenario. Let's just go back here. So I'm going to go back into here. I'm going to go Edit Controls, and I'm going to add the last type of control that we haven't used yet, which is the gain bias control right here. So I'm going to hit S1 below this, and I'm going to rename this. I'm just going to call it filter. So filter. And I want to show you this one because it behaves slightly different than the other two. Well, than the other one, you'll see. So I have my filter, enter, enter, and you'll notice this sort of looks like the tune control, but unlike the tune control, we actually have gain and bias controls here. The pitch control is sort of set up and calibrated for dealing with pitch CV, whereas this kind of control is sort of, it's open-ended. You can use it for audio, you can use it for CV control, pretty much anything but pitch. So I'm going to take this fader, and I want that to control my filter within. So I'm just going to go into this custom unit again. I'm going to go to our filter. I'm going to go to our frequency. I'm going to go into the subchain. I'm going to go to locals, and I'm going to assign that our filter control here. And I'm going to back up one level. And just like before, you have to make sure that there is a gain value here. Otherwise, whatever subchain signals coming in won't be applied. So you have to set it to at least something. So I'll set it to 1,000. I'm going to back up right to our top level again. So now we should have something here. So that gain setting I made is almost a little too drastic. So I can go back in. Let's set the gain to 100 instead. And let's just see how that plays. Not quite enough, so I'm just going to tweak it one more time. Let's set it to 300. Great, so that works perfect. And then last but not least, we have our hard set control here that we can set and forget. But just like before, remember, we can assign something to control even this control. So there's two ways we can go about it. We can use an external control. In my example here, I am going to use, I believe it's on A3, my modulation wheel from my KB37. And remember, nothing's going to happen until I up this gain control. So you have to sort of finagle the settings a little bit. Right now I have my KB37 wheel at full. Oh. So remember, I can do that. I can have an external source, or I could choose to have a local source, maybe something traditional like my ADSR envelope. And then I can actually use this knob as sort of as further tweaking of that envelope. And remember, that signal also gets processed by this gain here, so depending on how you have that set in relation to this, will give you different options and results as well. Or just like before, I could have that happening. If I insert a mixer channel, I can blend in some outside CV signal from my wheel as well. So, you know, lots of options here. So if I back out, we can see our ADSR shape. But if I move my wheel, it sort of adds to that as well. So lots of modulation opportunities here, and just the ability to control whatever you're working with. And keep in mind, what I'm controlling is audio, but this could all be used to shape, you know, a complex CV generator or a complex envelope or something like that. So there's no real rules here on how you use these controls. So that is sort of a wrap up of what a custom unit does and how custom controls work in conjunction with a custom unit. Next on the list, I'm just going to go to a separate channel here. I'm going to demonstrate this kind of custom unit. So far we've worked with this one called custom, and you'll also see ones here called 2-band, 3-band, 4-band, 5-band, and 6-band. Don't get confused with frequency bands like an equalizer, or if you're using a multi-band compressor or something like that. All these bands represent are different parallel slots. So if I pick a 2-band, check this out. Just like before, our custom unit has no controls, but now we have a thing called band 1 and band 2. And all this is each one of these bands represents a container you can put something into. And the idea is, if you have signal coming in, it will go to both of these bands in parallel. And like parallel processing, maybe you might have a reverb on one of them, you might have a delay on the other, but they're getting an equal trickle of whatever the signal is coming in. And I can demonstrate that here. Oh man, my cat again. If I add, let's say I add a sine wave oscillator, it's going to be below audio rates, but I just want you to be able to see the scope. Notice that that signal is going into this custom unit and it's being applied to both of these bands. So you can process that signal twice at the same time and do different things to it. So If it was, you know, a drum sample or a drum loop, maybe you have like a bit crusher on band 1 and you have a limiter on band 2, and using VCAs or channel mixers within, you can shape the levels of them. Let me give you a practical example of what you could use a 2-band for. So in the first band, I'm going to insert a saw wave. Let me do that here. Did I miss it? And in the other one, I'm going to insert a triangle. So you can see that these two waves have added together to create a weird shape here. And I'm just going to add a few controls here. So just like before, I'm going to go to this header. I'm going to go edit controls. I definitely want a pitch control. And I definitely want a gate control. And let's just do that. So in each one of these, I'm going to assign my volt per octave again. So I'm going to assign that to tune. And we'll go into number 2, do the same thing. Once you get used to this, it's actually really quick to navigate around. I'm sort of working at half speed here just so you can see it. And then here I'm going to assign my outside jack, which is, I believe that is D2. So here's an example of how you can use this 2-band in a practical way. And again, there's no rules for how you use these. But actually, so I have this gate control. I'm going to switch that back to a toggle. So I'm going to go to my gate. Notice how I can change the properties of this after the fact. I'm going to change this to toggle. And here's what I'm going to do. My first oscillator on band 1, I'm going to set my level to 0. And the control is going to be that gate local. If I can find it, there it is. And I'm going to set my gain to 0.5. So now I have on and off control of band 1. So what if I set the gain for band 2 inverse? What if I set the gain for this one? I'm going to set my local again to that gate. What if I set the level to this one to minus 0.5? So now check this out. I can flip-flop my signals. Instead of having them processing at the same time, they're separate. And just like before, remember on the subchain of this control, I can assign this a signal of my choice. So why not have an oscillator control that? Check it out. That's firing so fast that it's creating an automatic A-B switcher between these two signals. And if we go to the output scope, you can see our waveforms being modified in a unique way. What if I assign a pitch control to this oscillator controlling that gate? Let's do that. So now I have a switch sort of being controlled. There is a relation now. The speed of the oscillator controlling this is matched the CV controlling this tune. And check it out, I can go way up into audio rates here. So you can get some really interesting things happening. What if I had an ADSR controlling that? So I'm going to use a gate from the outside, which is on C1 for me. And I'll have that triggering an ADSR. Let's find it here. Where'd it go? I think I passed it again. Oh, Oh, there it is. And remember, it's a subchain, so I gotta make sure my gain's up. Some pretty weird results happening. Pretty gnarly sound. But that's just an idea of what you could do with it. Switch back to our synth. I'm gonna actually take this 2-band thing that we made here. I'm gonna shift and copy it. Let's go back to our synth that we made. I'm gonna go into it, and I'm gonna go into oscillator 1. I'm gonna actually just delete this saw that I made, and why not put this custom 2-band custom unit here? And I'm just gonna remap this. Instead of it being directly hard assigned to a jack, I'm gonna hard assign this to the local of our full synthesizer custom unit. You find it, it's right at the top. There it is, tune. So now I have, I mean, it doesn't sound great because I haven't really played around with this, but my first oscillator, if we go into it, is now that dual band thing I made that's switching between 2 waveforms based on this gate signal here. So there is a lot of potential for some really interesting things. And because this is self-contained in this container, this custom unit 2-band, I can save this as a preset. So I can use that for other stuff I'm working on if it's a process I use often. And of course, I can save this entire synth with everything within, with all those assignments. And I have this that I can use later. So I can overwrite my preset from the other day. And now everything is self-contained within it. This is the messiest sounding synth I think I've made in a while. Oh, it's so nasty. But you can see the potential of this. There's a lot of room for playing around here. We could use, this is another example. I'm just gonna go to our channel 2. And I'm not gonna monitor this, I just wanna show you just visually. Oh, hi Yugi. So I'm gonna insert, let's try a 4-band here. So notice that we have 4 bands here now. And I'm just gonna add one control here. I'm gonna add a gate. Ooh. I'm gonna add a gate control. I'm just gonna assign this. Oh, I still have my audio plugged into number 1. So I'm on out 2 now. This is fully independent. So I'm gonna take my C1 and check out what we can do here. We can create a complex CV source. So in band 1, I'm gonna insert a ADSR. And I think I just sort of half stumped myself here. So there is no actual, the input of this custom unit is on the left side. So that gate can't directly connect into this band. But I can add a mixer channel here and I can bring it in that way. And here it is. So there's my gate and there it is. So instead of doing this 3 additional times, I can highlight these guys, copy them, I can go into each band and I can paste. And let's do it here. So now we have 4 CVs doing the exact same thing. But if I change all the values of each of them, I'll end up with a pretty complex CV source. Because again, each of these bands are summed together to create one unified output. So, you know, maybe on band 1, instead of that CV being immediate, I could actually add a delay. And remember, you can delay audio and CV just the same. So if I add a simple delay, let me find it. delays. I'll set it to 100% wet. I'll delay that envelope creation by, let's say, 200 milliseconds. Check out all our CVs going crazy here. And if we look at the output, now we have a more complex shape. And you know what? I'm just gonna, after that, I mean, there are ways to do this a little bit with a bit more finesse. I'm doing this kind of quick. I'm just gonna change the gain by a little bit, just so we can see this better. It might be a bit too low. So you can see we have a lot of potential for mixing signals together and using that to tweak something else. This entire thing could be sitting within a filter's frequency control, or it could be, you know, a wet-dry parameter of a delay or a reverb or something like that. There's no real rules of how you can use these things. So just keep that in mind when you're working around. I guess the last thing that I'll mention is you might be thinking as a more experienced user is, well, now that we have the ability to pretty much grab a signal source from anywhere and add a control to any type of unit, why would I use a custom unit like this instead of a channel mixer? And that's actually a good question. I haven't really delved into this too much yet, but it is a good argument because now with a mixer channel, I could basically have all this stuff within. Oops, if only I could contain my cat though. If only. So technically I could have a whole bunch of stuff within this mixer unit. Instead of all these controls here, I could have actually built them on the header of this mixer channel unit, etc., etc. And with an added bonus, have solo mute and an overall volume control. So as of now with 0.4, I'd be more inclined to build all these things within a mixer channel, because then again, we do have gain control right on the top layer of the entire unit. And we also have a solo and mute control if we have a bunch of sound generators on the same strip. If we had multiple mixer channels and I hit solo, we could just hear that, or we could just hear another one. So I don't know. I guess now with 0.4, because we can pretty much grab all these signals, maybe the importance of a custom unit isn't as important as it once was, but I leave that to you guys. There's no real rules here again. You can use one or the other. I don't know, I still just instinctively grab custom units when I'm building stuff, but I might over time gravitate more towards using mixer units. And of course, a mixer unit can't compare to a 2-band or a 3-band, but I'm just talking about mixer channels versus custom units directly, just a single channel kind of thing. I think I'm rambling now. It's been a long day, so any questions, just drop a mail or leave a question in the comments, whatever, and I'll get back to you. Hope all is good, and talk to you soon. Bye.